Well, Alison Sargent is here with us in the studio to take a look through today's papers. Good to see you, Alison. And we're starting, of course, with a very sombre theme today, the attack on a church in Nice yesterday.
That's right. France is really reeling from this attack, especially given the context. It's less than 2 weeks after another attack. A teacher was beheaded, and then it comes on the eve of a nationwide coronavirus lockdown. Libération here is talking about the spiral of terror on their front page. And the paper writes in its editorial, between epidemics and religious wars, the world seems to have abruptly returned to the Middle Ages, especially here in France, the paper says, which is paying the price for its commitment to defending freedom of expression at all costs. Now, this idea is echoed in Le Figaro's editorial today as well, although the tone of the right-wing paper is far harsher. Le Figaro writes that France has done nothing wrong but welcome people who elsewhere would have to, quote, be quiet and live in misery in countries like Turkey. And that's, of course, a not-so-subtle dig at the Turkish president, who some French papers partially blame for causing this attack by stoking anger at France.
Yes, of course, and relations between Turkey and France are really under strain at the moment because of comments made by President Erdogan. And it's not just French newspapers blaming the Turkish president for stirring things up here.
That's right. We're seeing these claims in German papers as well. We can take a look at Der Tagesspiegel. They say Erdogan is at least partially responsible for the escalation. The paper writes that France's second terrorist attack in 2 weeks also has German security forces on alert. The paper writes, quote, with his incitement against Macron, the West, and Mohammed cartoons, Erdogan is firing up not only young, emotionalized Turks, but young Muslims in general. Meanwhile, the editor-in-chief of the Saudi paper, Arab News, writes, quote, thanks to the malevolent tentacles of Turkey and Qatar, the latest campaign against France has gone beyond politics and is now costing lives. It's worth noting that we also saw Saudi Arabia take France's side in Turkey's quest to boycott French goods, much to the frustration of Turkey, which has been calling out Saudi Arabia for, they say, betraying fellow Muslims.
And what about what's going on in the Turkish press? What have they been saying about the attack?
Well, Turkish papers are taking into account a very different context. They've been looking at France's recent actions. English paper, the Daily Sabah, writes that France recently launched an extensive witch hunt, in their words, against the Muslim community. And in a cartoon that accompanies another piece for the paper, they paint Macron as sort of a religious crusader with his shield there emblazoned with Charlie Hebdo. The paper writes that the French president is in a dangerous tailspin, and they say he risks turning France's Muslim community into a, quote, parallel society and empowering advocates of violence.
And that is something you would expect in the Turkish press. But that is also a line that we've seen in some Western newspapers as well. Which
That's
is
right.
More surprising, perhaps.
Yeah, there's a very critical piece in the Portuguese paper Público. The headline here is France is under attack, but Islam is as well. And the paper writes the fight against radicalism has not produced integration or prevented attacks. They also talk about the ghettoization of Muslims in Europe. Now, this is a perspective we see also expressed in the American press, sort of the concern that France's secularism is sidelining minorities, whether intentionally or not. The New York Times reports that the government's recent discourse about Islamic separatism and the enemy within has French Muslims questioning whether or not they're going to be ever fully accepted in France. One sociologist told the paper that the current debate reflects, quote, a failure of the French model of integration, which they explained used to be really coupled with a distancing or even a break with religion. Instead, though, the paper writes that thousands of French Muslims have integrated into French society but really retained their religious practices, and that has been considered a Republican betrayal by some political leaders here in France.
All in all, Alison, it is a pretty gloomy time here in France. We've got these terrorist attacks on one hand, and of course today we enter a new nationwide lockdown because of the coronavirus.
That's right, Laura. These are heavy times here in France. A business paper, L'Opinion, makes the link between terrorism and the coronavirus. They say there are two battles where the government's response has really been lacking. Still, the paper's front page cartoon is a little bit more optimistic. We see there both the coronavirus and a would-be terrorist scouring the street for victims and finding no one because, of course, the entire nation is on lockdown. The national mood is also well summarized by Aujourd'hui en France, their front page today. They say terrorism and COVID. France is sous une chape de plomb, which means under a lead blanket. Basically, things are heavy. For the paper, the right thing to do now is really to just close ranks and stick together. And we can end with France's Catholic paper La Croix, give them the last word today. Their front page message to readers here is hang in there.
All right, a message of hope at the end, a much-needed one, I think. Alison, thank you very much indeed. Alison Sargent there. And for more press reviews, you can, of course, go to our website, france24.com.